Hello, YouTube. Marielle here. I've just heard on the news of a female. Her name is Christy Sheats in Houston, Texas, that has killed her two daughters. One, I believe, was 17 and the other one was 20. And when the police arrived and asked her to put her gun down, she refused, so they shot her and she's dead. And apparently there was another person involved in all of that. I'm not too sure whether that was the husband or the stepdad, but he's the only person who did not get hurt. And this is what I'm talking about when I say that what's happening to me, my story is changing me, and profoundly. It's changing me profoundly, and it's gonna be hard for me to see things in a very different way, in a less compassionate way, I should say. This is a difficult issue. This is a very sensitive issue, and by no means am I saying that what she did was excusable or right. Not at all. But certainly I look at that story and I wonder what could possibly drive a woman like her to do such a thing. Is it desperation? Could it be desperation? Could it be just being at the end of your tail feather, like they say? Could it just be too much? Why did she attack her daughters like that? Why is that man not in such a situation? How could he just come out completely unscathed? It feels, in normal circumstances, a while before, I would have been completely like, oh my God, I can't believe this. Here's another crazy person, and those people with guns and blah, blah, blah. And I would have moved on. I would have felt sorry. I would have felt sorrow for those lost young lives. But I would have moved on. But now that I am aware of how people can drive you insane on purpose, and how somebody can manipulate your own children against you, and how they can manipulate you into losing your mental capacity, and how a partner can manipulate you into complete mental breakdown. Now that I've entered that reality, I can't help but wonder, I can't help but wonder. It's very sad. This is very sad. And it's a very sensitive story. And by no means am I saying that what she did was right. But I just can't help but wonder. Here is another story. Many years ago, And even at the time when I came across that story, my English was even more basic than now. But I remember how I felt about that story inside. And Oprah Winfrey made that interview, and I love Oprah. I adore Oprah. She's definitely one of my idols. She's really up there into the stratosphere of the giants and the big, the big people. But I remember feeling left down, feeling really let down by her in that interview, in that jail interview with a lady called Betty Broderick. This was a woman who killed her lawyer husband with his, can't remember whether she was pregnant or not, and with his new wife. And here was how the story went. They met when they were very, very, very young. I think it was at college, I think. They fell in love. They got married. And she went to work to help pay, or actually I think she paid for his studies to become a lawyer. And she's the one who worked and paid, basically as he started having a family, and as life went on, she's the one who supported the entire family until he was able to to take over. And he did brilliantly. He became extremely successful. He became very powerful within the community of lawyer, and I think he even had his own firm and things like that. He became very, very good, and he became super rich, very powerful, very well connected, and all that went with it. Betty, over the years, was able to stay home. She had 4 children. She became a socialite. She did all of those things, and to have lavish party, entertain guests, and support a husband in his job. And as the children were almost grown, and she was finally probably looking forward to having a relaxing time with her husband and all of those things, and basically now really benefiting from the reward of her labor as well. He dumped her and got on with this 20-year-old young girl, and the story is, by the news media and the outlet at the time, it was a case of she was a woman scorned. But when Oprah interviewed her, everything she was saying to me made sense. And gosh, I was just like a 20-something woman myself at the time when I heard that story, when I saw that interview with Oprah. Everything she said makes sense. To me, it makes sense, because I wouldn't want this to happen to me. Here was that woman. She really worked hard for her family, and her entire life was falling apart. Everything just came crumbling, and like she was saying in the interview, even the children didn't want to to hear her. Nobody was hearing her. Her husband had become so powerful she couldn't even afford. Everybody within the law community basically closed the door to her. She couldn't even get herself a good attorney to represent her because they didn't want to go against this very powerful man. She was deserted because all of those people that she had entertained and she had invited and did all of those things for her husband were against her. She found herself completely alone, and her husband was constantly, there was an awful lot of things going on, and she explained those things. It just makes sense. And there was no, from Oprah, I was very disappointed because, she's a woman cheerer, she's a woman champion. And I could not understand how she could not empathize. Yes, she was there, Oprah was there and conducting the interview and letting her explain herself, giving Betty the chance to explain herself. Yes. But you could tell there was no connection there. There wasn't, Oprah was in full condemnation mode. And this is what happens. Yes, what she did was wrong. Totally. Did she deserve to go to jail? Yes, you have to pay for the crime that you commit. The law is the law. And even without the law, there is just, you have to really try hard not to go beyond that. But there was no understanding. There was no compassion there on Oprah's side. And I was disappointed. And now what I understand as well is that sometimes there are experiences and there are things that unless you've been through it yourself, unless you've been there, you've walked those shoes, people don't understand. They don't get it. And there is a level of empathy sometimes with people, even if they are compassionate and understanding and all of that you want. There are certain things that unless you've been there, unless you just can't understand. And this is why this is tremendously helpful to have this community that I found, newly found, to talk about what's happening in my life, to talk about my relationship and the complexity of it. It's just so almost impossible to articulate those things properly, the crazy making and everything. And it makes life an awful lot easier just to know that there are people that know what I'm talking about. No, I don't have to completely explain myself entirely. It's okay if I come over here and I say, this is what he done, this is what he did, or I said, and I can be believed, even though I've got no proof. And to go back to Betty Broderick, yes, I was very young when I heard that story. At the time when I heard that story, gosh, I was so young. I think that story was like mid-90s or something like that. And never would I have imagined that I would find myself in a similar situation. My kids weren't even born. My kids weren't even born at the time of that story. And I felt so strongly for Betty. And now I feel even more strongly about that story. That story has never left my mind. It's always been there. And this is a woman who lost everything. And I'm going to put links below. You can go back. Hopefully you'll take the time and hear that woman out and see her story. But I recommend that you hear her interview, search for her interview, her own accounts of what happened, rather than the Hollywood story and people giving their 2 cents about the story. Hear her own first account of what she did. And even though she says everything is regrettable and she wishes it didn't go like that, she falls short of saying properly and completely just how she regret doing what she did. She keeps saying, I regret everything. I regret everything because there was no need for all of that. And guess what? I've done the same to my children. I'm always apologizing to my children, and I'm always saying to them, I'm so sorry that our lives have turned out that way. And I am so sorry that at times I behaved the way I did because I did not understand what was happening to me. And I kept trying to make things better while I was spinning my wheels. And because I was just spinning my wheels with you, so I was trying even harder to force you to understand and to force you to behave differently, which made you even resent me even more. But that was because I didn't understand the situation. I had no clue. But that doesn't mean that it is what you saw or what you perceive of me, of my behavior, is who I am. So it's so difficult. And the point is, when I see those things, when I see those stories, seen stories on the news over the years sometimes of entire families being completely wiped out by one of the children. And somehow I've seen quite a few of them, and it's been the father. Please don't, I know that when it comes to personality disorder and all of those things, I understand that female can be just as deadly and all of that, and mean-spirited too. But I've seen a few times where the father always comes out unscathed and be the one to go publicly to say how they forgive their child, how they hold nothing against the child. And sometimes even the father would actually have been wounded, but they're the first one to come out and say how they hold absolutely no grudge against their child, and the child would have killed the mother and the siblings and all of those things. At the time, I'll be like, wow, that person is really, really a real saint. That person has got such a big heart. That person is such a, unlighted person. But now I look at those and I'm thinking, when I think about those stories now, I can't help but think, did they manipulate their children to kill the family on their behalf? Is it possible? Because in this community, we know how our partners can turn everybody against us, can turn not only just cut the bonds, the emotional and the physical and the love between us and our children, but how they can turn them in such a way that the child feels like with you in the picture they'll never be happy. With you in the picture they can never be in peace and at peace with their beloved parent. You're in a way I remember just only last year, no, 2 years ago, even saying to my kids, oh my God, sometimes I feel like if you were to find me on fire, you'll probably not even want to even urinate in me to put the fire out. And both my kids looked at me and said nothing. And I swear, I've never done anything to my children for them to be like that. I could possibly have done to warrant, such reaction. Sometimes even by mistake, I'll brush them, my feet will brush past, or I'll touch them, and you can just feel them recoil. I will even say, listen kids, listen, I don't have the plague, It's okay for you to touch me, or it's okay for me to touch you. I don't have the plague. I didn't know then what was happening. And when I hear those stories, one has to wonder. I'm not saying that what they did is right. I'm not saying that. But could those stories really have much more to them than the media's take on it?